watching the fire as we grow. Oh, 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 oh. I want so badly to believe that there is truth, that love is real. And I want life in every word to the extent that it's absurd. And I told you to be patient, and I told you to be fine, and I told you to be balanced, and I told you to be kind. And in the morning I'll be with you, it'll be a different kind. I'll be holding all the tickets, you'll be owning all the fines.
When Oliver was born, he didn't cry. He entered the world, opened his eyes, cleared his throat, and simply surveyed his surroundings. I was amazed. I thought all babies cried when they were born. When he was a year old, we lived in Albuquerque. We thought our tiny fenced-in back garden was a safe place. I remember being home one Saturday afternoon when Helen and I suddenly realized that little Oliver had toddled off someplace beyond our kitchen where we stood. After a frantic search, I spotted Oliver from the garden, happily looking down at me from our roof. He had climbed the ladder placed there to access our rooftop beehive. He was very proud of himself. We, on the other hand, were terrified. He was adventurous right from the beginning. When he was 2, he memorized his favorite book, The Hungry Caterpillar. When he found the book at his Joy Bells preschool in Wilsonville, he proceeded to recite it to his teacher. She was amazed. She thought that Oliver already knew how to read. In those early years, we packed him along on all our hikes, campouts, and even world travels to Mum's family home in England. When he was just a few weeks old, we took him tent camping at a friend's property in the mountains of New Mexico. We were there to help with their cabin construction. Oliver would fall asleep every time the noisy generator ran and then wake up whenever it stopped. He slept in the covered bed of my friend's pickup truck through a terrific golf ball-sized hailstorm. The old Ford Bronco 2 Oliver inherited still shows the evidence 24 years later in the dimpled hood and roof metal. I recall the bruises on my arms and holes in my straw hat from running out to check Oliver as he slept soundly despite this thundering racket of giant hailstones smacking the sheet metal roof over his head. Unflappable boy since the beginning. His early years in Wilsonville were shared with you, Hannah, his brand new baby sister. Oliver loved the jolly jumper as a baby, but you not so much. Why was that?
Probably because he discovered that he could pull me back, let go, and ping me through the doorway like a slingshot. Oliver always denied any involvement whatsoever. When I was 2 and Oliver was 4, we moved from Wilsonville to Helvetia, with lifelong friendships that ensued with neighbors and their families, especially the Granite clan, the Glyns, and the Lawsons. The boys, Oliver, Christopher, Alex, Eric, Mitchell, and Richard, would occasionally allow Sammy and I in on their adventuring, but usually as the pet dog or servant. I think Mitchell and I actually got married once in our basement.
Remember the magic potions? I'll just take that out.
Oh.
The magic potions that Oliver and Christopher brewed in buckets and wheelbarrows in the backyard? I think Christopher inspired that mischievous, mysterious, and magical edge to Oliver's youth and developing personality. Whatever did they put in those potions? They often smelled really bad and were really scary looking.
Mostly mud and weeds, and probably goose poop. Later on, the boys created their secret fort in the barn. I'm pretty sure we'll never know the full extent of the antics that went on in Fort Medwig. Oliver was head of engineering trapdoors, booby traps, and other secret mechanisms. He actively promoted the complex secrecy policy for the team. I was allowed in once, but only permitted partial access to the low security areas.
Oliver was always pushing the limits and testing the rules. If he couldn't see a way to work around a barrier to get what he wanted, he would find a way to bust through it. And how about those great ski trips we would take? Often just the 3 of us in the Bronco, planning the night before, getting the gear all laid out up early, lunch packed, pockets stuffed with treats. Remember how I used to turn off the heat as we neared Ski Bowl to get used to the cold before we arrived?
We hated that.
Once on the slopes, we would eat our chocolate bars and M&Ms on the way up the chairlift and then rocket down the mountain at high speed. We were both fearless. Eventually, our frozen cheeks and wobbly legs would force us into the mid-station lodge to thaw out in front of the wood fire, hot chocolates in hand.
That reminds me of our family campouts, tent camping and backpacking adventures like Pamelia Lake, catching our trout dinner in the little stream feeding the lake, finding those perfect fallen tree snags, you and Mom watching as we climbed out to the end, bouncing up and down, standing below to catch us should we fall. Or fishing, tenting, and canoeing on crystal clear Waldo Lake with the Martins. Oliver learned his appreciation of nature and the outdoors from those times.
Yes, and later, Oliver was an exemplary Cub Scout and later a Boy Scout, getting as far as life rank before giving it up in preference to activities including youth group and band, where he could be with his best friends and stay warm, clean, and dry. It always amazed me how Oliver could spend 3 days camping with his troop and then show up for flag ceremony looking fresh and clean, while the other scouts would all be dirt from head to toe. Oh, I found this note from a weekend campout in my Treasures from Oliver.
Today, breakfast went okay. We ate the bacon, but forgot the eggs. Lunch went great. The cup of noodles were easy and tasted good. After lunch, everything started to fall apart. Everyone was cold and grumpy, and my mood wasn't helped by our messy camp. Oh yeah, I was elected patrol leader! 5 exclamation points. For today, people didn't listen to instructions, but that'll change in a while when I'll be a better leader. Campfire was fun. I was in 2 skits.
There were early signs of Oliver's personality and character in that note. His ability as a natural leader, his love of drama and theatrics, and of course, his disdain for dirt. So part of being a Boy Scout is being prepared at all times. Being prepared means having a good flashlight. And so began the flashlight wars. In the beginning, he was happy with a mini-mag. But as he got older, that was not enough. He had to have a flashlight that was bigger and brighter than mine, so he spent his own money on a Maglite 4D. However, can you hold this? This is my flashlight. Oliver, I still have the biggest and the brightest flashlight.
Oh wow, look at that. Closer to home, we were active in 4-H at the fairs. We showed chickens, guinea pigs, made vegetable creatures, table settings, and of course, Oliver's practically famous champion sponge cake. The recipe is in your program folder. He won first premium and champion several years with that cake. Oliver's childhood was made up of tree houses, lemonade and vegetable stands, water slides, backyard baseball, reading books voraciously, and numerous other endeavors. His love of computers and electronics became evident during these early years and into middle school, high school, and beyond. On one occasion, riding our middle school bus together, he proudly shared with me that he'd been suspended from using the school's computers because he'd changed several teachers' passwords and locked them out of their own accounts. This was just one of his infamous computer hacking schemes. Just ask Oliver's friends. I'm sure there's much more I never knew about.
Oliver excelled academically through his primary and middle school years. For example, he scored in the 85th percentile among high school seniors on SAT exams when he took them when he was only in 8th grade. Other examples of his extraordinary academic skill are too many to mention. But perhaps more importantly, Oliver also discovered the joy of serving and caring for others. With his youth group at Old Scotch Church, he took 2 separate short-term mission trips to Mexico to help children and families in need. He really connected with the children and came back changed. I think those trips really helped develop his compassion for humanity and desire for a meaningful career. Once in high school, Oliver poured his efforts into his friendships, music, theater, choir, and as time allowed, academics. He only just tolerated your mutual friendships with his inner circle of friends. But as a parent, it was lovely to see you two develop into mature friends and show respect and admiration for each other throughout high school.
Good thing we were close friends too, because we spent endless hours together in the theater and music departments, participating in virtually every play and musical every year. Our group musical performance of We Dance from Once on This Island took us to regionals and state. Rightly so, considering the countless hours of sweat and tears we poured into it. One of my favorite memories from that trip was when Whitney exclaimed, "Those are the weirdest looking sheep I've ever seen." Oliver replied, "That's because those are alpacas." Oliver's popularity and leadership resulted in his crowning as Liberty High School's homecoming king. This was certainly due to his kindness and appreciation towards his very many peers that had come to know and love him. And let's not forget about Liberty Heights, the high school soap opera series Oliver and his friends produced for LTV. The show is broadcast regularly across the school campus and is now immortalized on YouTube. He loved performing and doing that kind of thing with his friends more than anything. And how about Mr. Beckley's AP Lit class, where Oliver was asked to leave during Jeopardy for arguing over points he was not given? 2 years later, I was also threatened by Beckley with, "What is it about you Schaus kids? You need to tone it down or I'll have to ask you to leave too."
He developed a reputation for leading rapid excursions off campus during honors pass with you and his friends. Oliver yearned for travel, exploration, and adventure, and many of those here will recall donating towards Oliver's Sound of America band tour of Europe. It was solely his initiative, and he worked incredibly hard auditioning on saxophone in order to get accepted into the exclusive group of musicians and singers. That trip made a huge impression on him. It provided him lifelong friendships and opened his eyes to the greater world beyond our little Helvetia. It was certainly another indication of his young, adventurous spirit. The summer after his junior year of high school, I was thrilled that he sacrificed his time with friends to rough it with me traveling through Ecuador on my 6-week sabbatical. What a terrific adventure that was. We explored cities, mountains, villages, rainforests, and spent time with many of the indigenous people. Our travels finished with 2 amazing weeks spent with the entire family in the Amazon jungle and then on a boat in the Galapagos Islands. I know Oliver valued that opportunity as it broadened his worldly perspective. I will always cherish the time we spent together, the memories, photos, and the journal he kept to document our travels. At Whitworth University, Oliver continued to apply his creative abilities to saxophone, theater, and choir, as well as general mischief. He especially loved his choir trip to Argentina and Uruguay. One of his favorite university accomplishments, however, was the automatic door lock and entry system for his dorm room, complete with programmable card key entry that he built for himself and his roommates. Oliver certainly loved tinkering with electronics, and I am thrilled that I have his face etched on my PC board for my solar-powered chicken door controller. His very own design and fabrication, definitely one of his finer gifts to me.
It was clear that Oliver, as campus medic for 3 dormitories, was on the right career path when we started hearing reports from patients and faculty about how caring Oliver had been and how he'd always gone the extra mile for them. Their praise of his work was second only to Oliver's own enthusiasm for helping people in need. While applying for nursing school in 2010, Oliver accepted a position as tutor for Epic Hospital charting software. He excelled and was quickly promoted to lead tutor, traveling to Idaho, Alaska, and Montana, as well as many hospitals in the Portland, Vancouver area. On top of everything else Oliver was busy doing, he had nearly completed the training and flying hours for his private pilot's license, following in Dad's footsteps. He had no fear, no reservations, and was ready to conquer the world.
He finished his nursing degree at Linfield and passed his NCLEX to become an RN. He leveraged his interpersonal skills with Epic software experience when he applied for and was accepted into Tuolity Hospital staff as a PICU nurse. This was out of nearly 300 applicants. It became apparent very quickly that he was on a career path perfectly suited for his ambitions and character. Just ask any of his managers or colleagues at Tuolity.
All right, enter Lenny, who is, he can come up if he wants. I don't know if he will, though. You can just hold him up if you want. This is Lenny. One morning after Oliver's shift, he found a small, scruffy terrier, intact and full of fleas, running about in busy traffic. He grabbed him, popped him in the truck, and promptly called me in panic at 7 a.m. asking what he should do. We took Lenny to the vet to be scanned, scanned for a chip, and no such luck. We put up a found ad on Craigslist and at the Humane Society. After a couple days of not being claimed, Oliver decided he would keep the little terror. It was clear they were a pair meant to be. They loved each other unconditionally and even sported a similar hairstyle. I think Oliver's legacy will certainly live on in this ill-behaved and rabble-rousing little mutt.
Halfway through his one-year contract with Tuality, an opportunity to apply as an OHSU critical care nurse in the cardiac surgical intensive care unit came up. Not just a mouthful of big words. This was Oliver's dream job. Although torn with having to break his contract with Tuality, everyone encouraged him to apply, and through good connections, thank you, Kathleen, and his exemplary skills, he qualified for their training program. Although sad to see him go, his peers and managers at Tuality were happy for him and even allowed him to keep his contract by working a couple of shifts per month at Tuality until done.
Enter the story of the patient with scrotal gangrene.
Can we skip that story, please?
Well then, Oliver was at the top of his game when he left us. He had a dream job, lived in a great place with his best friend. He was in a great relationship, making lots of money, spending lots of money, nearly finished paying off his federal student loans. He rode a motorcycle, and he had just paid for his very own vacation to Cambodia and Thailand. He'd always told us he never wanted to grow old, and he really stuck to his guns on that one. We know you're sorry for having to leave us so soon. We know you love us. We know you are surrounding us with your kind and loving spirit. We love you, Oliver.
There was long when we first met. Oh, the grove, knee deep snow, watching the fire as we grow. I want so badly to believe that there is truth, that love is real. And I want life in every word to the extent that it's absurd. There's a bright golden haze on the meadow. There's a bright golden haze on the meadow. The corn is as high as an elephant's eye, and it looks like it's climbing clear up to the sky. And I told you to be patient, and I told you to be fine, and I told you to be balanced, and I told you to be kind. And in the morning I'll be with you, it'll be a different kind. I'll be holding all the tickets, you'll be owning all the fines. My. For the longest time, whoa, 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 I am the luckiest.
I can recall the many memories we shared together, including birthday parties, sleepovers, holidays, church events, video game nights, Dungeons and Dragons quests, frisbee golf games, and much more. Oliver was a fundamental part of my childhood, and his friendship greatly shaped the person I am today. Oliver brought life and great insight into our conversations, and I always enjoyed picking his brain. He was a man who really knew how to live life and seize opportunities. He was a friend who encouraged my artistic endeavors through college, and he was a brother to me, who I loved and will greatly miss.
Oliver and I are very different. He's tall, I'm not so much. He's thin, and I'm not so much. He loves Doctor Who, and I like Dr. J. He loved fire Pokemon, and I liked grass Pokemon. We were indeed close friends. So when we were in college, we would often have moments where we'd have this weird synchronicity, where we'd both think of the same thing at the same time, and then we'd look at each other and point and say, we're so brilliant. What? And we say this often because it happens between two geniuses like that. And it happened more and more frequently, and we find out why, because Oliver's a man of science and I'm not so much so. Our room at an errand hall at Whitworth, our beds would face along the same wall, and our heads would be the opposite corners. But our feet would dangle ever so close to each other. And so during the night, he'd like kick me or something, and I'd say, stop that. And he'd be asleep, so it doesn't really matter, but I'd still say, stop that. And so eventually we figured out that the only way we could have this connection was that during the night, our 10 most southern appendages would communicate. And in the 6 years after that startling discovery, we would have many more moments of that kind of similar synchronicity. And despite the distance between each other during different points in our lives, between traveling and working, we held on to that bond, that foot connection. And however funny it was to me then to laugh about it has become so very dear to me now. And his death has not changed that bond. His physical presence does not remove his very real presence in my life. He is and always will be foundational to who I am as a person, and who I'll become in the days, months, and years ahead. Gone but never forgotten.
I'm Alex Granite, one of the notorious Granite boys, I guess. When I first met Oliver, I wasn't sure what to think. I was 7, he was 4. Who did this little kid think he was? Smarter than me, sassy, brazen. These are all things I valued in kids my age, but in someone littler than me, I was not so sure. As time passed, we all, as a driveway, you'll hear us call it the driveway, Eric, Richard, Chris, Mitchell, and myself, we would all grow to be close friends. I slowly realized that Oliver was incredibly fun, smart, and kind. I realized how smart he was during calculus when we would play card games, and he would have no trouble with homework, and I would just be struggling. I could see how tender and hilarious he could be, both on and off stage during theater. We would shriek Benny and the Jets at the top of our lungs on one of these infamous excursions during honor pass. When university started, I wasn't able to see him as much. I was gone. I came back and found Oliver different, but not in any sort of a bad or negative way. Just the natural progression of a wildly intelligent, charismatic, and kind man from adolescence to manhood. We both had our motorcycle licenses at one point and motorcycles, and we talked and we said, let's go riding. I called him up and I said, hey, did you want to go for a ride? Immediate yes, no planner check. Well, he checked it afterwards. We then we planned a day trip to Mount Hood. That was our day trip on the motorcycle. And that, for some reason, that sticks out over the past 20 years that I've known him. He serves still as an example of drive. I will always treasure and remember that. And I will look to him as the man who inspires me to move purposefully.
Hi, I'm Chris Granite, Alex's brother. The other half of the Magic Potions duo. I first met Oliver when I was 4 years old. I remember how excited I was that a boy so close to my age was moving in next door. Many days after school were spent running past our old barn and jumping over the Schaus fence, the fastest way to Oliver's house. I can remember in particular a game we used to play on a wooden bench out on the Schaus family back lawn. Now, this bench was a magical bench. When it was tipped backwards, it became a time machine. When it was tipped forward, we could crawl through it and transform into whatever we wanted. We had many adventures traveling through time, flying past dinosaurs in prehistoric times, fighting with knights in medieval times, and befriending robots from the future. The great thing was, we could always flip the bench forward and transform ourselves to blend into whatever era we visited. We were an unstoppable team, and our imaginations were boundless. As we grew up, we shared every birthday party and every school day, from elementary school to high school. Oliver never lost his adventurous spirit, even in adulthood. He upgraded from flying bench time machine to piloting a real plane and was able to travel to amazing and beautiful places around the world. I know I am one of the many lives that Oliver touched. He was brilliant and friendly, compassionate and humorous. Oliver was a true friend and a brother to me. I will never forget those beautiful days where I flew through time on a bench with Oliver Schaus.
Hi, I'm Kathleen, and I've been watching Oliver out of the corner of my eye since we first met the Schaus family back in 2002 when we moved to Helvetia. I asked some of his co-workers to share what they saw in Oliver because many of you may know him from childhood, but you didn't get an opportunity to see the professional that he was becoming and the exceptional nurse that he was going to be and was already. From those that trained him and worked with him, they referred to him as intelligent, quick to learn, easy to teach, compassionate, funny, a snappy dresser for those who caught him out of scrubs, kind, confident in his demeanor, ahead of the curve. He had a positive attitude, critical thinking, inquisitiveness, and he asked questions, and very good questions, which is a key component of being a good nurse. Overall, it was repeated that he was ahead of the game, a good nurse, and people loved him and felt a strong sense of trust when he was providing their care. I saw these things out of the corner of my eye long ago. I was proud to have a Helvetia, West Union, Liberty kid in the hallways of our ICU, and I hope that he is the first of many. Clearly, he was needed somewhere greater than this place. As a good friend of mine who has gone before him, she said, "To live in hearts left behind is not to die." There are many hearts here today filled with love for Oliver and a belief that this life is only a moment of something much greater and much larger than here and now. Oliver really impressed me in so many ways. Helen and Chris, you did a very good job.
We used to watch The Office a lot in high school. It was huge, and Michael Scott was still on it. And there was a moment in one of these episodes where the character Jim would look 6 inches above Dwight's head just to mess with him. And by the end of this episode, Dwight was standing on his toes and yelling at Jim, "Look me in the eyes, look me in the eyes." And we thought that was so funny. And Oliver said, "I wish I could do that at some point." And we all said, "Yeah, so do we." But Oliver really did. One morning I walked into vocal ensemble and I noticed that Oliver wasn't quite looking our music director in the eyes. He was looking 6 inches above her head. And I thought, no. But he kept doing it. And our class was about an hour long, so he didn't stop. And in fact, halfway through the class, Andy Turner joined in. And our music director could tell that something was off. And by the end of the class, she too was standing a little taller and saying, "Look at me, look at me." Really sorry if you're here. Oliver was a sweet and committed and smart and spontaneous person. Most of the memories I have of Oliver are filled with laughter, some of them slightly irreverent, but amazing laughter. I hope that wherever he is right now, he's continuing to make people laugh and try new things. I want to end with a quote from Billy Joel. It's one of our songs that we sang as an a cappella group. It says, "Someday we'll all be gone, but lullabies go on and on. They never die. That's how you and I will be." And I really believe that. I love you, Oliver.
I'm just going to acknowledge right off the bat that whatever I say is going to be super inadequate and probably kind of repetitive, but just because Oliver was such a complexity. To me, he always represented like the perfect duality of innate brilliance and then somehow determined rebelliousness and spontaneity. And on one hand, he was so unbelievably bright. It was one of the most obvious things about him. He and I spent way too much time talking on the phone in high school, and I'll always remember staying up chatting until 3 or 4 in the morning the night before we took the ACTs. And the reason that night sticks out in my mind is because I did very poorly on the test the next day, but even an extremely sleep-deprived Oliver walked out with a 32. So I'll admit that in that moment I was not proud of him. I was angry jealous, but I swallowed it because that's what friends do. So humor and fun and spontaneous silly games were in the DNA of a friendship with Oliver. More than once, I went home in completely soaked clothes because Oliver helped cajole us into jumping into a giant puddle or massive fountain, and there was sadly never any time to warn our outfits what was coming. He was also uncannily witty, and it was entirely unheard of to have a joke-free interaction with him. All silliness aside, I always believed that Oliver had the capacity to somehow save the world someday. I think he would have done it too, he just didn't have time. But I can't help but be grateful that a person that incredible, I can't help but be grateful that a person that incredible made so much time in a short life for someone like me. So, thanks for saving my world, Schaus. I love you so much, and I refuse to ever stop, and when I get up there, let's make fun of some bad choruses of angels or something. Okay, I'm gonna read for Kayla, who is in fact in Texas, but was his roommate in Portland. Several summers back, Ollie and I drove to Northwest 23rd in Portland. We had returned from our freshman years at college, and after lunch, we got lost exploring the neighborhood, pointing out the most handsome houses and imagining what it would be like to live in such a stylish district. Who would have guessed we would have been given that opportunity just a few years later? We had a blast living downtown. You can't beat rooming with one of your best friends, especially one as weird as you. And even with the endlessly entertaining city of Portland surrounding us, some of my favorite moments were the times we spent inside the apartment, testing new recipes, dancing in his sleeping bag suit, imitating Game of Thrones dragon noises, normal roommate activities. One of my favorite memories in the Pearl apartment with Oliver, a perfect example of his never-ending thoughtfulness and huge heart, was the morning after we returned from a music festival in the Gorge. I woke up from my Sasquatch-induced coma to the terror of missing my work alarm. 4 days of camping and rocking out really takes its toll. Nearly plowing over on sleepy Oliver in my frenzy, I hurriedly explained my error while frantically gathering my things. As I passed the kitchen to run out the door, my sweet, sweet friend put a thermos in my hands. It was my morning coffee, my daily ritual. While I was spinning around the apartment like a madwoman, I hadn't noticed that he'd heated the water, assembled my French press, and brewed me my coffee. This small act of genuine compassion was one of the many ways Ollie cared for me last year. I love you, Ollie. I miss you every day. And when I see you again, I can't wait to hand you a mug of Yorkshire tea. Cheers.
I'm Morgan, and for those of you who don't know, I had the pleasure of being Oliver's girlfriend and friend. We were friends for about 5, and we dated for about 6. And I just have a silly story about Oliver to share. Oliver and I were spending time together one evening. We'd eaten dinner, and we're on his computer looking up the next Doctor Who episode to watch. Suddenly, Oliver jumps up and says, "Oh, before I forget, I have something sexy I've been wanting to put on for you." So he winks at me and dashes out of the room. This was unusual, very unusual, and I found myself slightly concerned at what he was going to come back wearing. The longer he was gone, the more curious and uneasy I became. He was gone for about 5 minutes. And then I hear this swishing, shuffling noise coming down the hall. A very unattractive noise, I might add. He appears suddenly in the doorway, and he places one hand on the door frame. I can't believe you brought it. On the door frame, it says, coyly looking at me as I've ever heard him sound, and says, I told you it was sexy. I laughed so hard I cried. He then proceeded to trip over said sleeping bag onesie. It was big even on Oliver. And falling down, adding to what I would refer to as the allure of said outfit. It was so big on him that we needed to see if I could also fit inside. I could. But then we got stuck. And since Eric wasn't home, we were stuck in this sleeping bag onesie for about 20 minutes and couldn't get out. It was very hot and very, very uncomfortable. That's what being with Oliver was like for me. It was silly, it was fun, it was vibrant, it was memorable. He was my friend for many years before he was my boyfriend, but I loved him and we had a wonderful time together. I wouldn't trade the time I had with him for anything. One final Doctor Who quote I have for you was one that Oliver actually told me he really liked and showed me one time a couple months ago. It's, when you're a kid, they tell you that's all, that's it. Grow up, get a job, get married, get a house, have a kid, and that's it. But the truth is, the world is so much stranger than that. It's so much darker, so much madder, and so much better. Oliver didn't want to lead a normal life. He wanted a mad one, a passionate one, a remarkable one, and I think he had it.
I'm Maureen Granite, and I'm a neighbor of the Schauses, and I remember getting to know the Schaus family when they first moved next door 20 years ago. I recall being very happy that they had a boy the same age as my son, Christopher. We always hoped they would be good friends, and they, along with Eric and Richard and Mitchell and Alex, formed a strong bond, quite like brothers, really. We enjoyed several vacations with Oliver's family and with the Lawsons. I recall Oliver betting his mom that he could catch a pigeon while we were in a park in England. Helen was certain he couldn't do it, but she had to pay up 10 pounds when Oliver patiently waited and caught one. I loved seeing Oliver's passion for singing and acting grow while he was here at Liberty High School. One of my favorite memories is of him playing the lead, Curly, in Oklahoma while Christopher played Judd. These two good friends played two opposing characters very well. Oliver was a fantastic lead in the school production of Chicago as well. Watching him take charge of that part and sing and act and dance his way to excellence was wonderful to see. While going through pictures recently, I saw again the young Oliver who played at the beach, performed in the preschool end-of-year program, went to scout camp, and played soccer. There was frequently an impish grin accompanying much of what Oliver did. That, as well as a determined look while concentrating on mastering something new. I loved getting to know the adult Oliver in recent years, especially as he finished nursing school and worked in the medical field. He worked hard, but he was always so excited about this new direction in his life. He responded with enthusiasm when asked how work was going. This was such a good place for someone like Oliver, who was brilliant and compassionate. I'm sure he must have touched a lot of lives in his work. I know he touched our hearts here.
I've got a beautiful feeling everything's going my way. If you saw the production and you saw Oliver ride a horse through corn, that's how Oliver was to me, somebody who could make everything go his way. He was magical and somewhat mysterious. How did he always know so much about everything? And he was generous. He never made me feel less intelligent. He made me feel necessary and very much appreciated. One of the items Oliver gave me is a book of active philosophy addressing metacognition. How much do you know, what you know, how do you know, kind of a thing. I'm sure he read it, did the practice quizzes, and found no use for the book once he'd read it. He had absorbed it, and he mastered it as he mastered everything he did. His forays into the school's computer system are quietly legendary. His passion for living in the moment allowed schoolwork to sometimes take second or last place. His adventures in academia. Mr. Soon reminded me the other day that Oliver started and completed his capstone senior project in 7 hours. My favorite memories are those when Oliver would come and sit in my office and just talk, just process, just rhapsodize about the potential of his life and his plans, working through a conflict with a friend or another teacher, and the trust he placed in me to keep our conversations and musings in that office is not something that I took for granted. He taught me to listen without dispensing how-to advice. The tenderness and love that exuded from that young man, his desire to live a life well led, the quest to do so, the books and plays we would discuss, and he was such a wise young man. Oliver is the only student I have ever known whose sounds I knew. I knew when my classroom door opened and footsteps fell, they were his. I didn't ever need to look over my shoulder to confirm it. The sounds of Oliver's footsteps were like his laugh. I loved the way my name sounded when he would greet me, like music. His voice, his laugh, his footsteps, uniquely his, unforgettable, transcending time and place and recorded like music in my heart and my memory. I've never known another young man that I could say, oh, he's like an Oliver Schaus type. When in my class or casting a play or in my day-to-day travails, Oliver was unique as they come, a young man on the cusp of everything life held in store. So bright, accomplished, thoughtful, playful, naughty, loving, generous, and sincere. And maybe what Oliver exuded is what made him the accomplished actor who could tap into a character's truth. Hereafter, Oliver, in a better world than this, I shall desire more love and knowledge of you.
Oliver returned home from his regular night shift early in the morning of November 2nd. And that afternoon, he was found in bed by his girlfriend, Morgan, who had come by to retrieve her phone charger and walk Lenny, Oliver's dog. He was not breathing, and his body was cold. She called 911 and administered CPR. The paramedics could do nothing. The medical examiner is not certain of the cause of his death. And Oliver's family kindly requests privacy, discretion, and no further speculation or inquiries concerning what happened. Those details are tough to hear, let alone experience. And I could ask the question, are you hurting a bit today? And I'm guessing you are. In fact, there's no guessing involved, really. We're here today because we're hurting together. And we come from many backgrounds and situations. Realistically, there are many things that separate us as people. Yet we have at least a few things in common together. We love Oliver. And though we reminisce about Oliver's well-lived life, we are left with a deep, lingering pain that strikes at our soul, and we're hurting. And we understand, really, that life brings its share of joys and sorrows, and we heard a lot about Oliver's life today. I enjoyed that. Childhood memories and long-lasting friendships, his incredible intellect, sacrificial compassion. And we smile as we remember, and we can laugh, and we understand that hurt is a part of life, but this much hurt, well, it hurts us very deeply. And it's one thing to lose a job, or maybe to break up with a boyfriend, or have our car break down, and it's another thing altogether to have Oliver gone, to lose my son, my brother, my friend. This is another level of pain. And to lose him as a young man in the prime of life, it only gets worse. And losing a job, we can apply for another, and breaking up with a girlfriend, maybe there's somebody else out there. And that stupid car dying again, I'll pay the expensive repair bill, though I don't like it. But Oliver's dying, his death, that's something very different. How do we fix that? Many of you know my daughter, Grace. She's 14 now. She's here with us today. And when she was 2 years old, she contracted leukemia, cancer. And she had a period of about 3 years of cancer treatments, shots, and sedations, damaging chemotherapy, spinal taps, bone augers, blood draws, hair falling out, nausea, vomiting, crying, screaming. Some of you walked that road with us. Tough times for Grace and for Karen and for me, her parents and her brothers, challenging for her family, our church, and our community. But the absolute worst part, the number one most terrible thing about her cancer was our fear of her death. Will this take her life? Will she die? And will she leave us at a young age? And we lived with the shadow of her death for many years, and though the shadow has faded with time, in disquieting moments, it still lingers just a bit. But here, the shadow of death hasn't passed us by, it's struck, and Oliver's gone. And the course of our life has changed, and we react. And for those closest to Oliver, and for all of us in some measure, there's just absolute shock, numbing pain, and inconsolable grief. What happened? Why us? Why Oliver? Why not someone else? And some of the big questions of life surface, the ones that in better times we might ignore or we don't consider or we just want to set aside for another day. Why is there pain? Why is there much suffering? Why do bad things happen to good people like Oliver? Why does life at times seem unfair? God, are you there? Are you paying attention? Do you care? God, I'm not even sure you exist, and if you do, you must not be paying attention. You must not really care. And even if I'm not really sure you're there, I'm angry with you. I really need to be upset about someone or something, because this pain is very deep. And even if we believe that God isn't real and this physical life is all there is, we're still troubled. Is there any meaning to life in existence? When all the nice parts of life are stripped away, are we left with a meaningless stutter into nothingness? And I'm guessing with this audience, you could add to my list in some way. And I'm sure I'm not really capturing all you're feeling and experiencing. But some of these key questions are common to all of us, and we doubt and we question and we fear the unknown and we grieve, and death appears to be this unbreachable divide, and life seems so challenging and unfair at times. And I don't really have all the answers to the mysteries of life, existence, and suffering. But in the midst of our hurting hearts, I'd like to offer some healing words from the mouth of someone else. From someone who I believe cares about us and loves us deeply. And we might say or feel at a time like this, I'm in so much pain I can barely stand it. I'm grieving and I'm hurting. Jesus consoles us. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. We might say or feel, I'm deeply troubled. There's a disquiet in the depths of my soul. Jesus comforts us. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God and trust in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. And I'm going there to prepare a place for you. We might say or feel, the world is a dark place. I can't see my way in the shadows. Jesus encourages us. When a man believes in me, he does not believe in me only, but in the one who sent me. When he looks at me, he sees the one who sent me. I have come into the world as a light, so that no one who believes in me should stay in darkness. We might say or feel, I'm really angry. I'm sad about Oliver. I'm going to take it out, and maybe accidentally or even on purpose at times, on someone else. Jesus urges us, a new command I give you, love one another. As I've loved you, so that you must love one another. By this, all men will know you're my disciples, if you love one another. We might say or feel, life is disheartening. Life in this world is difficult and troubling. Jesus emboldens us. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. We might say or feel, I feel dead inside and the way forward is shut to me. Jesus guides us. I am the way and the truth and the life. We might say or feel, I need something tangible. My faith is very shaken. Jesus challenges us, because you've seen me, you've believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. We might say, death is the final divide. Our separation is forever. Jesus declares, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? God, help us in our questioning pain, our struggle to believe, and our understanding of your deep love for us. Amen.
For the longest time, whoa, for the